and you haven't had a chance to sign those petitions, but you'd like to, there's a little bit about each of them. So we should never gather without a petition. That's the rule. So I just would like to also acknowledge that I am an uninvited settler here on the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe, the Huron-Wendat, and the Haudenosaunee people. And also tonight we're going to be talking a lot about our social safety net and people struggling with homelessness. And I was doing a little bit of research, and one of the things that struck me was that our local Indigenous population is about 4%, but the percentage of homeless people of Indigenous ancestry that are struggling with homelessness is 30%. So they have an outsized impact that is probably, well, I'm not a scientist, but directly related to the challenges they've faced as they've been colonialized and the treatment that, you know, we have put upon them. So it is something that I was quite struck by, and I thought it was something we should all think about a little bit. So tonight we have a very interesting group of speakers. We may not have solutions for all of our social issues, but it's a good time tonight to talk to people that have direct firsthand knowledge and have ideas and know how the system works. I think it's going to be a good time for us to learn a lot about our social safety net and the types of programs that we have available. And to start us off, we have Bill Sanderson. He was a longtime counselor in Belleville and on the Social Services Committee, and he's going to be willing to share some of his knowledge with us. Thank you, Bill.
So what Lori said there about a long-term counselor, 4 years is a long time. And so I'm an ex-counselor, but certainly enjoyed my experience there. So it's great to be with you tonight. I've got some prepared notes, so I'm going to basically stick to my script so that I manage our time together effectively. And okay, is this better? Yeah. Okay, sorry about that. So it's great to be with you here tonight, and I want to thank you for the invitation, Don and Lori. It was great to be able to participate. And I've been asked to speak a little bit of what I learned from my time in municipal politics to bring some perspective to what's going on. Tonight, I'd like to discuss with you my conclusion that our system, which supports the most vulnerable, is working exactly the way it was intended to work. It's not designed to eliminate the cause of the problems leading up to what we will speak about this evening, but rather it was designed to treat and manage the problems. Features that would measure effectiveness, judge performance, and instill accountability are simply not there. And what do I mean? So each year we spend more and more money, but have larger and larger numbers of people requiring assistance. Instead of problems getting better, all indicators show that it's getting worse, more in terms of numbers and more in terms of severity. Excuse me. I see a system which misallocates resources by waiting to treat people who have already developed the most severe problems rather than preventing and minimizing the problems at the front end. It's dehumanizing, it's tremendously expensive, and it's disrespectful of those who work within the system who just want to help people. Tonight, we're going to hear from, I believe, Natalie, Ashley, Dominique, and JJ, who work with the most in-need members of our community. I don't know exactly what they're going to say, but I know we will all learn from the struggles to help people who are suffering. I know we'll be inspired by what they describe and how they make a difference. The topic of tonight is what's going on, but I wonder if it should be, are we okay with what's going on? Unlike the change that we are accepting, I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. Unlike accepting what's going on, we need to speak up and put a voice to what needs to happen. And part of that needs to come from the grassroots. I'll say a little bit more. In Canada, social assistance programs are directed, funded, and delivered by governments at 3 levels. And it's supported by personal and corporate donations, and in some cases by school boards, communities, religious and charitable groups. There is no lack of participation in trying to help address this problem. And we spend a lot of money, billions and billions every year, with significant annual increases, particularly since COVID. And we spend more, but have worse results. So there's no lack of funding. And since there's no lack of participation, no lack of funding, why is what we're doing not working? It's not working because it's set up to fail. And to understand why we're here and what we need to do to look at, we need to examine where we came from. So Canada was designed as a cooperative federalism. And the intention was to create a thoughtful decision-making process. However, it also created slow and cumbersome structure that would give time to thwart and stall changes, that were not in people's self-interest, and it makes it easier for them to oppose rather than to propose. It's also important to note that provincial governments set up municipalities limited to property tax revenue and restricted the vote to only those who owned property. Changes came over time, especially when the impact of universal suffrage added groups to the voting pool by gender, race, and most importantly, to all residents, regardless if they owned property or not. This improved the virtual, this removed the virtual veto of business and property owners and led to the great expansion of the social welfare state, leading to the Canada that we have today. Health outcomes improved, greater equality, a more educated population. All this led to economic strength and opportunities and a better quality of life. So if all of this improvement occurred, why are we seeing increased levels of mental health and addiction, as well as a growing homeless population that's greater in proportion than even what we saw during the Great Depression? And it's because our social programs deal with problems. We fund to assist people after it's too late. We reward public servants and elected officials with larger budgets when more people become dependent. Political leaders make incremental additional funding because they govern for the headlines of today and not for the future. Political leadership now is making it look like they're doing something when in fact the situation is getting worse. This happens because voters don't know who to hold accountable. The federal government will say that it transfers funds to the province. The province will provide some programs certainly and transfers more and more to the municipal and regional governments. But at each level of this downloading, the larger portion of the funds ends up going to administrative costs and doesn't get to where it needs to get to. Candidates promise to fix this, but it's impossible for voters to get accountability, and it's made worse when we forget the campaign promises made the previous time. And then they either re-promise or we elect a new bunch of people to fix these same issues over and over again. We elect and re-elect people to hold office who want to stay in office instead of those who want to bring about comprehensive change. Tonight, you will hear the presentations and consider the enormous challenges those organizations are experiencing trying to help people. Ask yourself if the structure of our system is the source of their salvation or the source of their continued plight. Problem solvers tend to be open-minded. They solve problems by understanding the challenges and adapting to the situation. Usually by learning from what others have done, we see other jurisdictions around the world who do things differently and have a better and in some cases worse results than us. I'm sure some of you have heard of the blue zones throughout the world, where people have the longest life expectancy because they lead the healthiest lifestyles. There are several around the world, but one of these is Singapore. Singapore incentivizes results and recognize that prevention is more effective and less expensive than treatment. Their healthcare system deals with mental and addiction issues when they arise, and treatment isn't optional. Supporting funding is in place to incentivize healthy behavior, to support aging in place, and to live a healthy life in mind and body. The results show significantly less healthcare related costs, as well as lower levels of addiction and criminal behavior. Singapore is a city-state, which means that they have one government and not the cooperative federation that separates three levels of government that we see in Canada. As a result, their leaders are able to act with more impact, and they are easily held accountable. Here in Canada, we do have examples that our system can be nimble, with different levels of government working in unison to solve problems. And if we think back to what happened during COVID, all three levels of government acted quickly, they acted in unison, and as a result, Canada had some of the best results throughout the world. So why can't we see the same success when it comes to some of the issues we will discuss tonight? It comes down to the need to change what we're doing if we want a different outcome. So part of the challenge rests in the answer to the following two questions. Question number one is, are we satisfied with the current outcomes? And question two is, if we are not, then are we prepared to change the system to get the results we want? I ask you to think about these questions as we hear the presentations of the others, and we certainly can discuss it afterwards if these outcomes are unacceptable to us. Thank you.
I always love when we have homework to think about. So that's amazing. I do, yeah, it isn't acceptable, I don't think, when there's empty buildings to see people struggling outside, they're living in tents or no tents, sleeping bags on the sidewalk. And there's spaces they could be warm and cared for. And so we can do better. We need to do better. And hopefully we'll learn a little more about how we can do better. The one thing I did look up as well about women experiencing homelessness is that 70% of them were fleeing abusive situations. And then what else struck me was that 60% of them had never contacted any type of police force or reported the abusive situations that they were in. And I thought that's interesting because that's a lot of burying of problem. And so to speak to the supports that we do have for women fleeing abusive situations and the problems that that many of us women face is Natalie from 3 Oaks. And come on up.
Hi, thank you, Lori, and thank you for the invitation. As you know, I'm Natalie. I'm the Training and Public Education Coordinator at 3 Oaks. So I feel very grateful to be here tonight and to be able to speak with you all, as the work that I feel that I have the privilege of doing can be life-saving. So tonight, I want to speak on behalf of women who've been silenced, isolated, and driven to live in fear. I'm speaking for the women who survived and the women who did not. And I hope that everyone here tonight will soon acknowledge the epidemic of intimate partner violence that is happening right here in our province. So 3 Oaks mandate recognizes that historically, women and children have experienced systematic and institutionalized inequality in our society. And we recognize that women and children are disadvantaged by our patriarchal society, and because of this, are frequently victimized by violence. We recognize that violence against women and children is both an expression of their disadvantage and a coercive tool used to ensure its perpetuation. 3 Oaks was founded in 1983, and since then has remained an indispensable service for women and their children and in our community. For the past 40 years, 3 Oaks has remained a necessary agency in the community to ensure the safety, protection, and recovery of women and children. At 3 Oaks, we provide a comprehensive network of both free and confidential services for women and children who have been victimized by intimate partner violence. We offer an emergency shelter, which runs 24/7, 365 days a year, a 24/7 crisis line, outreach counseling for women and their children, family court support, a transitional support program, and a second stage housing option. But tonight I want to focus on the why. I want to share the reason that 3 Oaks is an integral organization for all of its community members. The COVID-19 pandemic caused a dramatic increase in the reported incidences of intimate partner violence. And this is due to the increased isolation that women in abusive relationships had experienced. The stay-at-home order had major implications for those who were already residing in an abusive relationship. This resulted in women being further isolated from their support networks and further hindering their ability to escape. Although the lockdowns we were experiencing have basically gone away, the violence that women are experiencing has not, and is actually escalated. Intimate partner violence crosses all socioeconomic backgrounds, ethnicities, races, cultures, religions, and careers. Intimate partner violence does not discriminate and is affecting people in our community. She could be your sister, your mother, your friend, or your neighbor. And everyone in this room will know someone or has known someone or is someone who's experiencing violence in their intimate relationship. And we must instill the truth that all women and children deserve a life free from violence. The Ontario Association of Interval and Transition Houses, OAITH, is a coalition of various organizations which all work towards ending violence against women, including 3 Oaks. And annually and monthly, OAITH releases a femicide list to ensure that we all remember the victims, to bring focus to violence against women, and to encourage everyone to take action. A broad definition of femicide is the gender-based killing of women and girls as the most extreme form of violence towards them. The monthly and annual femicide list compiled by OAITH includes a gender-based killing of a woman, child, trans woman, two-spirited person, or a gender nonconforming individual, where a man has been charged in relation to the deaths or has otherwise been deemed responsible, a murder-suicide. And in 2022, 52 women and girls in Ontario lost their lives to femicide. And since then, to date, 46 more women and girls have lost their lives to femicide. This work is not only about how someone lost their life, but who took their life. And it is important to note that the data in these femicide lists are only partial, as these numbers rely specifically on media reports and information that are released by authorities. So which means if the relationship or gendered element is not included in a report of a killing of a woman or girl, it would not be included in these lists until the information is collected. These increasing numbers of femicide and the numbers of women who are accessing our services at Three Oaks are not predicted to decrease. And from just April to July of this year, Three Oaks provided emergency shelter to 36 women and 21 children. And in this time, we had to refer 18 women to shelters outside of our community because we were at capacity. And from April to July of this year, we received 482 crisis calls and supported 52 women in developing safety plans for themselves and their children. And from April to September of this year, we provided counseling to 138 women and 134 children. So Three Oaks is funded by the Ministry of Children, Community and Social Services, but that only covers a portion of what is needed to continue to provide the support to women and children in our community. And each year, Three Oaks must raise $160,000 just to keep our doors open. The funding that Three Oaks receives is not keeping pace for the growing demand of services that victims and survivors of our community need. Our services are a lifeline to women and children who are experiencing intimate partner violence, and the importance of being able to provide that necessary support to them is clear. Leaving an abusive relationship is not as simple as it might sound. It can be even more dangerous for a woman to leave, because abuse is about power and control. When a woman attempts to leave, it can cause her partner to try and establish that control by retaliating in harmful and sometimes lethal ways. And due to this, leaving is often the most dangerous time for women and their children. But beyond the physical risks of leaving an abusive relationship, there are endless reasons why women may stay. Children, disability, cultural or religious context, fear, intimidation, lack of housing, lack of financial independence, lack of support, and a lack of available resources are only some of the reasons why it is extremely difficult to escape an abusive relationship. I also think it's important to note when women call us as well, if we don't have space, that would be another reason as to why they may stay in that relationship. In my previous role at Three Oaks, I had the privilege of meeting a number of strong women who had fled to safety at our emergency shelter. Hearing their stories of the violence that they had endured, the violence that their children had witnessed in the home, and the trauma that they are now forced to work through is exactly why I'm here tonight. Mothers of daughters who are in abusive relationships will call us, and these mothers will ask us what they can do to help their daughters escape. No mother should be afraid that her daughter might not make it out of a relationship alive. And it takes an incredible amount of strength for a woman to reach out and share her story. And at Three Oaks, it is our job to support these women, to present her with options, and to support her in creating a plan to leave if she is ready to. The various services offered allow us to grant women the right to choose which form of support best suits their comfortability and their situation. And for women and children who have been victimized by violence, Three Oaks can become a place of refuge. This is why it is so critical for all community members to stand in solidarity with victims and survivors of intimate partner violence, as we must let the women and children in our community know that we support them. The systematic and institutional inequality experienced by women allows for Three Oaks to remain an imperative organization. The women and children in our community need us to be engaged and to take action. And tonight is an important opportunity for a collective effort to support women and children experiencing intimate partner violence. And I hope that when we leave here tonight, our conversations around intimate partner violence leave stigma behind and instead offer a sense of support without judgment and an urge to take action. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie. That was amazing. Yeah, that was very touching. I believe this month is Wrapped in Courage campaign. So there are purple scarves, and I don't know if you have any. So Natalie has some with her. So they're encouraging people to wear purple scarves just to support the women who are courageous enough to survive and and hopefully escape abusive and violent situations. So anyway, I just wanted to point that out. Because there'll be a lot of opportunities tonight to talk to these amazing people who are working and see what you can do to help. And also we need to advocate to change the system so that we don't need so many support systems at the end, but we can keep them from needing them all the way through. So I think next we'll call Ashley Vader. They work at the Grayson Shelter. They do some amazing work there. And I should just give out a shout out to Sydney, who's front row. She does volunteer recruitment and training. So if you feel called to help out at the Grayson Shelter or any of their other aspects, there's Sydney.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here tonight. These are two very big topics to follow, so I'm going to do my best. I, like Bill, am going to read from my speech that I prepared today. So I'm Ashley Vader. I'm the Director of Operations for Grayson Shelter, a homeless shelter and a transitional house in Belleville, Ontario. So to give you some understanding of my expertise in serving the homeless population, I have been working with this field for 13 years. I was a street outreach worker in London, Ontario, working with the folks experiencing homelessness, as the title states, on the street. I became a housing case manager for youth ages 16 to 24 experiencing homelessness, looking for housing. And then when I moved back to Belleville to work for Grayson, I became the team lead, working hands-on in the shelter with the folks of the Bay of Quinte area who are experiencing homelessness. I have since moved out of that role, but that didn't end my love for this population. And because of that, I have been working to educate folks on the stigma that we assign to certain populations and potentially challenge or even break the stigma. Stigma, by its definition, is a mark of disgrace associated with a particular circumstance, quality, or person. This definition really only speaks to the onlooker's perspective. The person who is assigning the circumstance, quality, or person with a label that identifies them as someone or something that is only ever to be viewed through the lens of that associated disgrace. When we are addressing the public views on homelessness, it's not a far reach that many people will identify their feelings of fear for safety, disgust, or uncertainty of the homeless population. These feelings are not invalid. Homelessness should elicit fear. You should feel disgust when thinking of somebody who is outside without a home, experiencing homelessness on the street. Without a stable home and putting people in extreme danger every day. The issue is that oftentimes we assign blame to the person who is living in those circumstances rather than the root cause of the issue. As many have noticed at the beginning of my time, I've used the term experiencing homelessness rather than state homeless people or person. Language is one of the ways that we perpetuate a negative outlook on a person who could be considered the victim or survivor of their circumstance. The order in which we label someone speaks volumes of who we care about and how we care for them. If I were to speak about someone living with a terminal illness, the same way the world continues to speak about someone who is struggling with addiction, I may be considered apathetic at best and extremely offensive at worst. Cancer Jane is an unacceptable way to address somebody, a human being. Yet we have become complacent in calling someone an addict. Looking further into the root causes and educating ourselves can not only help or lessen the stigma of homelessness, but it can actually aid in ending homelessness. It is human nature to fear the unknown. We stay away from it, we sometimes get angry at it, and we go out of our way to avoid it. By speaking truth into an issue, in this case homelessness, we open ourselves up to being solution-focused. We are no longer blind to what needs to be done to see an end. Instead of seeing someone as an addict, we look at the root causes of addiction. Addiction is a trauma response, a coping mechanism, a public health issue. How do we solve these things? By addressing the trauma, by funding programs that can do this, we no longer see the person as the drug, but we are seeing the needs of the person as a whole. Removing the idea that the person is choosing the drug Let's broaden your perspective. Addiction is now deemed as an illness, the person no longer having a choice in the matter. I have worked with folks all across the spectrum of homelessness. Many of them were affected by the change in legislation for opioid prescription dosages. Someone who was prescribed for years at high levels by their healthcare provider were then left with functional addictions and almost overnight forced to compensate, some moving onto street drugs to find the pain relief that they gained from their monitored and prescribed dosage. Without the proper withdrawal supports in place, folks became addicts overnight at no fault or choice of their own, left to work through these functional addictions by themselves, brought on by governmental change. Instead of seeing tent cities pop up and thinking, what a mess, what's the root cause? The lack of affordable housing, and by the way, affordable now just means the average cost of housing in the area you're searching for. It no longer means affordable relative to someone's earnings. In some of these cases in Belleville and the surrounding region, rental prices for a bedroom is over $900. That is not a one-bedroom apartment, that is a bedroom in a house. Canadian government states that your housing cost should be about 30% of your overall budget. Social assistance in Ontario for an individual's total overall income is $733. This includes their basic needs and their rental portion. $733 monthly is the equivalent of working 44 hours at minimum wage per month. Consider when COVID-19 first hit and everyone started losing their jobs. The government deemed an adequate monthly income through the COVID Employment Response Benefit, otherwise known as CERB, to be $2,000. This feels a little like we're trying to set people up for failure, but continuing to perpetuate the poverty cycle. How can one get a job without an address? How can one get an address without affordable housing? And how can they afford something from social assistance that doesn't even cover rent of a room? Vast systemic changes are needed. Cost of housing does not just affect those at the bottom, but they see the most negative effects the fastest and the harshest. These are just a couple of examples of how we create a narrative about a population that has very little control over their own solution. As an agency that is currently responding to the homeless crisis, Grace In is doing a small piece of the work to break the public opinion on how we see these folks. We call it radical kindness, choosing daily acts intentionally to build bridges across differences, develop solidarity and shared ground, and promote social connection between different groups and communities. We believe that this is the direct route to engaging with a population that has had the world put onto them that they are not worthy. We believe in radical engagement, engaging in radical relationships that are real and gritty and raw. This group of people, while they are doing their best to survive unbelievable circumstances, they still care, they still love, they still hope. By responding with trust first, we can give people back a sense of dignity they deserve. My goal of this time today is to place another challenge on all of you. Think of one way from tonight's messages. How can you act on this mission? One place to start is by changing your language. Take some time to educate yourselves on one of the topics presented to you tonight. Talk to those in your circle of influence about what you've learned. Go to your local representatives, and some of them are here tonight, seeking solutions, and not just a way to hide the problem, but truly address the root causes. Our community leaders have an obligation to care for those people they are elected to serve. It is our obligation as a community to respond to the homeless crisis and not deem the people affected by this crisis as the issue. These are our neighbors and not our neighbors' problem. Thank you.
Wow, that was so great. And I have to think, monitor my own language many times, but you're right. It is, it's not someone's fault And I was listening to a little discussion that Mike Schreiner did, and he mentioned that currently, beyond the fact that $733 is not enough to live on, ODSP rates also not enough to live on. But if you are working full-time at a minimum wage job in Ontario, 0% of those people can afford rental accommodation. That's not, so we're all in this space where we are very vulnerable to becoming homeless. If you're renting, you could be able to afford the rent, but then your landlord could say, wow, I'm going to do a few renovations and I'm going to increase the rent, and you have to move out while I do the renovations. And often people are losing homes that way. But 0% of people earning minimum wage in Ontario can afford to rent anything in Ontario. That's not good for anybody. So to follow up this amazing presentation, we have given Dominique the next spot to talk about the County Foundation that does so many amazing initiatives right here in the county.
Good evening. Thank you for inviting me out tonight, and what a wonderful turnout. This is what community is really about, right? Coming out to hear other people present and speak. You're not just sitting in front of a television being, well, I'm blabbing at you right now, so maybe ignore that. But anyway, you're really processing that information. You're talking to the people beside you, and you're really thinking, how can I create an impact? How can I do things differently? So for a little bit of context, my name is Dominique Jones. I'm the executive director of the County Foundation. We're the local community foundation for Prince Edward County. And we work a little bit differently than our wonderful partners at the Grace Inn and Three Oaks in the fact that we are a collaborator, we are a funder, and we are a source of local community data. Some of you may be familiar with this, and we do have it available online, of course, very environmentally conscious that way, but also print for some people that like to refer to it. I carry this around with me wherever I go. But Vital Signs, what it is it's a national campaign of community foundations where we collect data on our community. And why does that matter? Because information matters. That's how we can create better outcomes for future, by being informed. We take this data from a myriad of sets, including census, but we also work with our community partners to get a little bit more of that boots on the ground information and lived experience to complement the data. We use this to inform our own decisions as an organization, and we offer it to the community in an accessible manner where our partners can use it to apply for funding. They can also use it to inform decisions and also to make sure that our residents know what's going on. So our organization isn't that old. We've only been around since 2008. And 2013, we actually did our first Vital Signs report. Do you think it was really popular? It wasn't. It's a lot... It's received a lot better now in the current mindset, but in 2013, we got a lot of backlash because here you have the community of Prince Edward County come visit the county, right? Wineries, Teslas, vacation rentals, and we were speaking about a lower than the provincial average graduation rate in our high schools. We were speaking about food insecurity, homelessness. So that was a bit of a shock for a lot of people. But since then, I do have to say that we've been able to take that information, and our local government, our municipality, our organizations are using it as a tool to inform and create impact. So springing off of that, another piece of work that we do is collaborative action. We can only do so much as an individual organization or as an individual person. We're greater together. So with collaborative action, we've worked with community partners on specific issues. We have a bunch that we've worked with, but for example, one really tangible example is transportation. We're in a very rural community. One of the biggest gaps here is getting from point A to point B. Maybe you don't have access to a vehicle. Maybe putting gas in that vehicle is difficult. So having a source of transportation is a real gap in our community. Thanks to working with community partners, we were able to start the first transit bus within Prince Edward County, the county transit. And I will just very quick plug. The only way that we can continue to drive that program and increase services is by increasing ridership. So I'd say give it a try. The other thing that we do that we're probably most well known for is our granting and stewardship of funds. And we build these funds to act as a bridge to a lot of gaps that we're seeing in ministry funding for organizations. And quite honestly, in particular with Prince Edward County, a lot of grassroots organizations that do not have access to that funding whatsoever. They bootstrap it. They might have one employee, and it's all volunteer boards that are making this happen and volunteers that are coming together. They're not a line item. They're not getting that funding through a ministry. So they're making it happen through donations, through campaigns, through granting, and they're the ones that we're really trying to support with some of this bridge funding, as well as our larger organizations. So a couple of things that I wanted to, I guess, bring home tonight, and I know that we've talked a lot about the issues, and that there are issues, and sometimes it can feel really grim. It can feel like, you know, if you look back to 1980, 1990, the 2000s, have we really gone forward? I'm an optimistic person, probably to a fault, but I like to think about things with an abundance mindset. So we know from our data that there are gaps in the community. We know that there are systemic issues, but what can we do about them is the question. So we know that politics influences a lot of things. The little green stuff makes the world go round, of course, but that's why being informed is so important. That's why coming to events like tonight is so important. Being an informed voter, being an informed advocator, that's how you're going to make real policy change. But what else can you do? There's actions small and there's actions large, and there's some in between. Everybody can do something. You can advocate, you can share information, even just report information like vital signs. Talk about it, take a look, know what's going on. You can get involved. And that can be in a myriad of ways. You can volunteer. Do both of your organizations need volunteers? Yeah, everybody will say the same. If you have ideas on, you know, the system is broken, people should do things differently, get involved, join the board, join a committee. You have talents that you can contribute to an organization. And of course, that green stuff that makes the world go round, you can always contribute as well. A couple of points that I want to make about financial contributions. If you're looking at the nonprofit sector as a whole, interesting fact behind it, the workforce that's driving nonprofits, and it's probably not going to come as a shock looking at your speakers today, majority of women and minorities are what are driving your nonprofits. And we know that they are underpaid in general, due to the funding sources that come in, and due to a resistance to fund any sort of administrative costs or operations. I hear that all the time. When we're looking at grant funding or donors, everybody wants to fund the tangible items. We want to fund the food at the food bank, but we don't want to fund a coordinator that's going to coordinate volunteers. No. We just want to fund the food. But I would challenge you to think about that a little bit more. Be educated, of course. With our charities and our nonprofits, they're very intelligent individuals and organizations. Do your research. Look at financials if they're available online. You're going to be able to see those cost ratios, and you'll know that, okay, they're really bootstrapping it. Because unfortunately, there's been some examples in the past across internationally that have given organizations a bad rep. But operations make that work happen. So as much as you may not want to put funding towards the coordinator that's going to plan the volunteers, that are going to do the outreach, that are going to deliver the food, that's what makes it happen. So in summary, I just wanted to say that as a community foundation, our vision is to work together to build a place where everyone can belong and can thrive. And the way that we try to do that is by being nimble, by trying different things, by not being afraid to advocate for different items. And I encourage you all to take these calls to action, sharing the information, getting involved, contributing financially, not just sitting on the sidelines. Become part of the action. Thank you.
That was amazing. I know that a few various organizations that have applied for county foundation grants, and they do amazing work. And it is important to consider that every time if you have an organization and you expect it to work the way you want it to and be able to fulfill its mandate, you should probably consider that you have to pay some of the people there to do the administrative tasks. So definitely something to consider for sure. I just wanted to mention, we do have, save the best for last, JJ. Oh, there you are. So JJ from the John Howard Society is going to speak to us. And if any of you are unfamiliar with some of the work they do, JJ is going to tell you about the support they give to the day drop-in center at Bridge Street. But I was shocked at the amount of outreach that they do throughout in many different sections and just within Belleville alone. So JJ, thanks.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for the invitation to be here tonight. This is some really, really heavy stuff. And you can feel it kind of in the environment right now. You know, everybody's thinking and it weighs on everyone. But specifically so, it weighs on you when it's affecting your community. And it's not just that you're seeing it in bigger cities. But you're seeing it in your small towns and the places that have always been very squeaky clean and places that are pretty. And so tonight I'm going to take a very honest approach, and that might not be the most favorable. But it's really what everyone needs to hear, but most people are afraid to say. So there's no candy coating, and we as service providers are not blind to the scary and the unpretty parts of mental health and substance use, violence, and other precarious traumas displayed on our streets today. It's just become more visible. It was always here in some capacity. We just did not see it as visible before. One thing that comes to mind when I was sitting in the back tonight thinking about all my amazing partners in our community was that it really wasn't too long ago that I moved to this area. And there was a huge campaign put together to build a new shelter for an animal shelter, millions of dollars. And I love animals. Don't get me wrong. I have a farm, but it's illegal to leave a dog outside, and it's not illegal to leave a human being outside. So John Howard, Belleville and District, we went together with Bridge Street United Church at the beginning of the pandemic. And that was because they the government stepped in and said, we're gonna have some lockdowns. Well, where do homeless people go in a lockdown? You're not allowed to be inside anywhere, and now you're not allowed to be outside either. So the drop-in was created, and that's very much what it was just a space to bring people in during lockdown. The first year, the staff served 32 people. Last year, they served 67 people. And today at closing, they served 108 unique individuals. Our funding comes from Hastings County, but our staff are only paid $24 an hour because that's as far as the budget stretches. These are individuals who I am so proud to be here tonight with, that literally save lives every single day. The individuals who are overdosing, and the frontline staff are running out and providing injectable Narcan and nasal Narcans and doing chest compressions. They're de-escalating violent situations, and some people just drive by and that's what they see. They see the staff jumping in there, and the staff are amazing. You guys know how much I love you, but there's something behind that. Why are there violent situations? Because this is all that that person has. This is everything that they have in their whole life, and they're going to do every single thing they can to protect it. Supporting, we also are very big on language and how we speak to the people that we serve. And one of those things is by, we call the people that we serve our guests. And it's more about providing dignity and respect. We support them to attend appointments, which is really crucial. When I started with John Howard, I had a number of people come to me from our bail program. We provide a bail verification program for people who don't have someone to be their surety. So they might have done a petty crime. Maybe they stole food, and they don't have anyone to sign for them to get out of jail. So they're sitting there with somebody who's in on a serious assault charge. And so our bail program helps with that. And so they said, well, you know, these people are missing their bail appointments, and so we're going to have to breach them. Not one person stepped back and thought, well, if I'm living in a tent, how do I make my 9 o'clock appointment? Because I don't have an alarm clock by my bed. Sometimes the expectations that we have as a community on people are very high, and we don't even realize it. So we try to take a proactive step. What we do at our drop-in center is that we offer a lunch program that's served through Bridge Street United Church, and the John Howard staff offer breakfast and lunch and dinner 3 days a week. We offer a nurse and a nurse practitioner. Many of our guests have a number of ailments. They're either very distrusting of the medical profession for one reason or another, and they often feel embarrassed to seek help. So this way we have people coming to them. We have housing worker, crisis support worker, addictions and mental health. We offer laundry services and showering, clothes if we have them, and pretty much anything and everything you can think of that we can give someone, we will. What we have learned over the course of the last couple of years is that when someone who is homeless accesses a warming center, they're not allowed to sleep. So it's 2 a.m. and you're in -32 weather, and you go inside and you're finally warm and you're drying off and you fall asleep, and you're told by security to get up and get out. It's absolutely inhumane. So we all came together as service providers and sat down. And one of the things that I love about Belleville since I've been here is that there's a lot of conversation. And I really do love that piece about this Quinte area, is that lots of people want to be involved and lots of people want to talk to get something started. And I will talk more about that in a minute. I want everyone to really think, though, with the costs of rent being $3,200 for a 2-bedroom and the price of the inflation of food, many of us are one paycheck away from being in the same boat. It has come to our attention in the last little while that there are a number of 2 working parents in a household who are still using social services because they cannot afford to live. This has gotten to a point that is unsurvivable if we don't do something very soon. So when I talk about that I love people coming together and having those conversations, I really think that's important. But I'm a little different, and I sometimes gets me in trouble. But I want to stop talking about it. And I want to start doing something about it. And so part of that was I went to a meeting and everybody was talking. We all had these really great ideas, but we didn't have a building. And so everybody said, you know, we can't. How do we afford to get a building? Because it's just not viable. We ended up going and partnering and being able to get a building, which was the biggest step. But with that building, we were able to bring all our service providers together. And at what will soon be called the Bridge, will be a service hub that has complete wraparound services. So there will be our 3 Oaks, and there will be our Grayson shelters, and there will be our food banks, and everyone will be in one space. And instead of expecting people who are unable to reach us, we're going to meet them where they're at, which is what should be happening all along. So when we look at some of the reasons that we see homelessness, it's not just a simple answer. And that's something that I hear a lot when I speak to people about the work that I do. It's really compounded. There's a lot of reasons that someone becomes homeless. And it could be that they are afraid to use a shelter for whatever reason. They have a history of something and they're really scared to go to a shelter. And so they'd rather sleep outside. And so there are so many things that we can offer, but until we look at those compounded issues of what this person truly needs, we're not going to be able to solve anything. The food bank now, actually, my team was telling me today that they can only access it every 60 days because of the food shortage. So if you're given a $25 gift card and a little bit of food to get you through, how do you make that last 60 days? I just don't know how that's even possible. People often say to me, who are your guests? They're your kids. They're your brother, they're your sister, your parents, maybe. These are everyday people just like you and I. And some of the staff can tell you the stories that they tell us about, you know, my son, which is something I heard the other day from a guest, his son's graduating university. And he just fell on some really hard times. And so he's been using the drop-in center. But how proud he was of his son, but how humiliated he was that he didn't want his son to know that that's where he had to come to shower and do his laundry. It's really an all level of government, all level of community problem. This isn't going to be something that's fixed overnight. And with our collaboration on the bridge and hoping to bring all these service providers to one spot, that's a great idea. And I really do hope that it serves a number of individuals, but it won't solve all the problems. And I don't know what the actual answer to that is, but it's got to come from all levels of government. It's got to come from community, and people saying enough is enough and stepping in. It's got to come from provincially, and it's got to come from a federal level as well. One of the things that I really wanted to talk about tonight was that there's always individuals who have the best of intentions, and they think that they're doing something really great. And we had someone come to the church and offer pizzas, and then when our guests would not take them, they became infuriated. I just bought all you homeless people pizza and you will not take it. Would you take pizza from a stranger? Probably not. You don't know what they did to it. They are no different. They don't trust, they don't know you, they're not going to accept that from you. Just because they are homeless and have nothing, they still have some dignity in there that they want to protect. They're human beings. And so I think that when we look at all the things that a number of our community partners want to bring, we also have to remind ourselves of how we're making our guests feel. Because to them, somebody said to me about the bridge, I heard that there's going to be a fence put up. So you're just hiding the homeless people now. And I said, no, actually, the homeless have asked for the fence to go up because they don't want to be gawked at either. They don't want people laughing at them and taking pictures and staring at them. They want to be able to have some self-sense and live their lives too, get the supports that they need without feeling like they're being scrutinized. Our guests feel a lot of loss. And I think that's something that not a lot of people really understand. They have their own sense of community, and I'm sure my partners can say that. When you look at and you have really deep conversations with our guests, they'll tell you, they'll say to Hillary, I haven't seen so-and-so in 2 days. Maybe we should go look for them. Or so-and-so was using, you might want to just keep an eye on them because they don't look very well. We had guests walking around a couple of weeks ago. There was a bad batch of fentanyl that was causing people to overdose quite frequently. And we had guests walking around with us with Narcan all over them, just trying to help out as many of their peers as possible. And it's that sense of community that brings them to the drop-in. They want to come in and have breakfast and drink a coffee and engage with everyone else. They talk about their plans for the day, whatever that might be. But it's that sense of community that also brings the unpretty and sometimes the very ugly scene of tents and sleeping bags and clothes, because they don't want to leave the church property, because that is their home, that is their community, that is all that they have. So they will keep their belongings there and close so that first thing in the morning, they can go in and have their coffee and talk to a friend. So John Howard is basically just one of many service providers that currently is offering as much support as we possibly can. But this is a bigger issue, and it's a bigger issue that I don't think any one of us can solve alone. It's gonna take a collaborative action, and it's gonna take, like I said, the levels of government to come together and say, we have to do something about it. And we have to do something about it now, because every minute that goes by, people are dying. They are freezing to death. They are starving. The one thing that I often will hear is people say to me, why are they using? These are substance users. One, sometimes when they use, it makes them feel warmer. So they will do that so that they don't feel the cold. But I actually had a guest 3 weeks ago tell me that he uses at night when the drop-in closes, so that when he comes to in the morning, the drop-in is back open. And so for that period during the night, he doesn't have to worry about anything because he's not really conscious to live through it. So I leave you with this. You can all look the other way, but you can never again say that you didn't know.
Well, you guys have just done such an amazing job. I cannot thank you enough. Your words are so impactful. And it just kind of, I don't know, I just feel like a fire's been lit under me. And I'm sure the rest of you are feeling somewhat the same. I did just want to mention a few things before I open for questions. If you do have a question, maybe come up to the microphone, because we had problems before. We can't really hear people out in the audience, especially for people at home on the Zoom. And I did just want to mention a few things I learned about housing, which is a huge issue. But I was surprised to find out that 33% of the houses in Ontario are now owned by multiple homeowners, people who are investing in homes and are not living in the homes. That's 1/3 of our housing stock. And I was also, now in Toronto, they did a study, and 16,000 homes in Toronto are used as short-term rentals. And I know in the county, for sure, that's a huge issue. Again, housing stock gone for investment purposes. And in Kitchener, they have built 3,000 condo apartments since 2016 to 2020. And 77% of those condo units, apartments, are owned by investors. 77%. I was just blown away by that. So somehow we've commodified housing as an investment instead of a place for people to live. So I'm shocked really that it's gotten that bad. And there are things that could be done about it. I did see an article in the paper where Catherine Brown was not happy about Todd's reaction to the homeless crisis in Belleville. And he said that it's worse other places, and apparently. And honestly, that is not helpful. Is there anyone that has a question that they would like to direct to any of our amazing speakers tonight? You can just shout it out if you don't feel comfortable coming up. Bill? Did you want to come up, JJ? Bill just asked, he thought John Howard Society mostly advocated for people who had been released from jail.
So that's a common misconception. John Howard specializes in prevention of crime. So my background is actually as a criminologist. And when we look at preventative measures, we look at what gets people to where they're really at. So John Howard focuses a lot on youth programming, getting kids who have come up through CAS services, and meeting them where they are, getting them into housing, getting them independent, working with them. If they have had conflict with the law, to work with them through diversion. And that meaning that, you know, they have to come and they have to volunteer. And they have to work off what they've done. For adults, our adult programming is a program called DAP, and it's called the Direct Accountability Program. And what that means is that if you steal from Walmart, then you're put on a plan and you're going to pay Walmart back. We don't take anyone who's a serious offender, which I think is something that most people think when they hear John Howard. We advocate for change, fair, justice, but more, we want to look at how do we prevent crime. You know, when you look at the statistics in Belleville and you have, you know, 10 people on a bail list in the morning, but all those 10 people are on the bail list because they stole food, we have a bigger issue. And so it's meeting those individuals and how can we get you so that you're not stealing food? Who can we connect you to? What can we work with you? And it has been most effective. I think the direct accountability program, we have a lot of people that come back and they say, you know what? I didn't really realize, because I thought when I stole $100 from Walmart, that I was just stealing from this big corporation. And I didn't really realize that maybe it had an impact on the workers. And all the other people, the people that did the products and everything else. So we do a lot of intense workshops, getting people to understand what their behaviors impact later on. So it's not really advocating for criminals, it's advocating for fair justice and preventative measures so that we can reach people before they turn into somebody who's going to commit a violent offense or a more harmful offense.
No, that was great. Any other questions, anyone, or you can all, yes? I was just double checking with Lenny, our amazing person here, who does our technological wizardry. All of the speakers here tonight have been recorded. So we will be, once I upload the video, It usually takes me about a day because I'm not very technologically gifted, but it will be available to be seen. So I believe that anyone that's registered at the door or to the Zoom meeting will be getting a recording. I believe we did that last time. And it will also be on our website, which is Bay of Quinte at gpo.ca. Pardon? Oh, and Dawn does a summary, but it's not quite as impactful as hearing the speakers, who I think were so amazing tonight. You guys are just, oh, so good. You know, I think you're right. We will, like as JJ said, we can't say, you know, we didn't know, we hadn't heard, we didn't realize the extent of the problem. After tonight, everyone here can say, I have a really good, well, not a great understanding, but a much better understanding than I had before of the issues. And if less people look away and more people look to what can I do? How can I help? How can I assist the John Howard Society? How can I assist at Grace Inn Shelter? Can I work at the food bank? Can I help at Three Oaks? What do you need? What, you know, within my skill set that we can do, we can make some change. And I'd also like to say, because many times we've talked that we want all levels of government to work together on this, which is sometimes difficult, but it wouldn't hurt to write some letters or go and visit your MPP and your MP, Ryan Williams, Todd Smith, and our local council members, and just say, you know, I'm really concerned. I was at this talk and I heard these, you know, amazing speakers, and we want to know, what's your plan? What are you going to do about it? How are you going to advocate to get more money into the system here? Put some pressure, never hurts.
We're kind of different than how we're, we are not fingering the part of the story, not further institution pieces. And then we can always invite the community partners. But what you have to do is just connect with volunteer at Grace Inn Shelter instead of work
Don?
I can always be relied on to walk out on the thin ice. I know in the county, the police budget is either the second or third largest item on the budget. So I'm not asking anybody to be critical. The question is to all the speakers. Are our first line responders doing a great job in terms of supporting you? And could the money we spend on them be used more effectively? And any of the speakers that want to answer, and if none of you want to answer, that's okay too.
Well, I think a lot of our policing partners, our emergency response partners, see this as our fault. You take care of them, so that's why they're here. You offer services, so that's why they're here. I know I'm not sure about the other services, but I do know that there's times that staff call 911 and they have to wait 45 minutes. That's a really long time when someone's being stabbed outside. Or if someone's down and you tried Narcan and they're not breathing and you've got 3 people doing chest compressions. It's also the comments, I think. You know, staff have ran all day and they've done whatever they can and you have an officer come in who makes a joke about how they have to be there to help you with your job, your mental health, you deal with it. But they're not mental health. They're not, these are social service workers. And like I said, they're paid just above minimum wage to do what they do. And they're not very well supported. We support each other, I think, within our community of partners, but we are not well respected by the other professions, or at least our staff are not. I think probably us as people in executive roles are better supported, but definitely not. Like I said 2 weeks ago, when we were in a real pit of a time, we had even a fire captain who came to me and said, "So you're just leaving these people outside for the night?" And I said, I don't have any funding to run 24 hours. I'm not allowed. And he said, "Okay, so in the morning when they're all dead, I will be sure to come looking for you." And there are, 6 of my staff standing there crying, saying, "JJ, we don't want to shut the door." Well, I didn't want to shut the door either, but I don't have the funding to pay everyone to keep the door open. I don't have the support of the city to run 24 hours to keep a drop-in open right now. And so I think looking at those budgets, I could better allocate some of that money.
I would also like to say that the fire department has limited the shelter to 21 people. So when they're the ones making the comments about, well, I'll come to you when they're dead, like they're the ones that are setting the standards for the shelters as well. So we can't even add more people to our shelter. We literally are not allowed to have more than 21 people in our shelter based on the firefighters, like the fire prevention officers standards. So when they're the ones that are putting this pressure, this immense pressure on the frontline workers to do more, they're the ones that are also putting the barriers in place for us to not be able to do more. And to address the police issue, when we talk about police coming and saying things to our staff members, all our staff have in their defense, is de-escalation techniques. We speak to our guests. We do not have Kevlar vests. We don't have weapons. We do not go hands-on. And so when we are calling police to come and respond because there is a violent act that's happening, we literally are putting our lives in danger to prevent other people from getting injured. And yes, we're quite successful at it. And John Howard's staff is quite successful at it. And I know that Three Oaks staff is also quite successful at it. But these are the only things that we have in our pockets. We can't do more than what we are trained to do. We are not first responders in the sense that the funding of first response goes to. We are just talking people down and hoping that it works. So when we're saying that, is there a reason that allocation of funding goes to, police? Yes, they have impact workers, mental health workers that can go alongside them, but from the workers' mouths themselves, they don't do homelessness. They do not support, they do a lot more prevention work than response work. And, we all try to get out of response work. We all try to advocate for prevention. It is social service 101 that you try to work yourself out of a job. But unfortunately, like Bill said, our system is built for response and not prevention. So we're doing the best we can with the budgets that we have. But yeah, that's kind of what I have to say. And you can come back on up.
I'll probably be the unpopular one in the room and I'm happy to walk out afterwards. Full disclosure, on the personal side, my husband is an OPP officer. Yeah, you can boo, that's okay. and he is the community safety officer for Prince Edward County. So I do have a personal attachment there, but also on the professional side and the volunteer side, I was on the board for Alternatives for Women, which is the Prince Edward County counseling, advocacy, and transitional housing organization for women fleeing domestic violence, women and children, and coincidentally, a lot of pets as well. And I have a couple of things to say on this matter. I think that police, the way that it's been approached systemically for a long time, has been responding to crisis, not prevention. That's not what they are trained for at all. And I think that this is more of a question of, okay, how do we work together to augment and complement that? And I'm not saying that you haven't experienced awful comments from police officers. I know that that is the case, and I know that that does happen. But I'm here to tell you that there are also officers that are trying to do good and trying to change that narrative and work with other collaborative mental health organizations and impact workers. So I will tell you that with Alternatives for Women, there was a very bad history in the past between policing and that organization. I came on board, again, slightly unpopular because because my partner worked for the OPP, and there was between the OPP office and the organization, there was that feeling of like cats and dogs, basically. They didn't understand each other and kept butting heads against these other issues. And it took some time, and I'm not saying that it's definitely not perfect by any means, but I think it took getting everybody into a room, getting leadership, and I will fully commend Staff Sergeant John Hatch with this. He was on board with saying, yeah, let's see what we can change, start some education. So Alternatives for Women have been going into the local OPP office and talking to the different platoons, making sure that they are aware of the services that are offering that education. Is everybody getting gold stars when it comes to it? Probably not, but it's a step forward. So again, probably the unpopular opinion in the room, but I think that we can do better. Again, like I said, a forever optimist, abundance nature. I think that funding can be directed to augment and support that response, that emergency crisis response that they are trained for. And I think that that we can do more in terms of preventative nature and how to educate and support our officers to do better in the community with language, with the way that they work with our organizations. And unless if we are willing to have that conversation, and I'm not saying it's easy and it takes leadership from the OPP side or from your local police detachment, unless if we're able to do that, you're going to be oil and water, cats and dogs, and it's not going to change. So unpopular opinion, I'm happy to leave now.
I will just say quickly that when you put an either or, there's no reason in a country as rich as ours that we can't fund our police force and also our social services to the same extent or more, because actually they're probably needed more. Hopefully, if we funded our social services at a higher level than we do our police forces, which is often the biggest line item on the budget. If we could do that, then I think eventually we wouldn't need as many police, theoretically. I can talk for myself. Did you have a question? Oh. You said a little. Yeah.
I want to thank all the speakers today. I came over to get educated. I came from Belleville. Okay, can you hear me? Okay. I have a history of working in social services. I also have worked in the medical field as well. So I do apologize if where I'm coming from because I'm also an old girl. And I remember way back when they closed, I think it was 999 Queen Street in Toronto. And these young ones here don't even know what that is. That was a mental health institution that took care of and housed all these people that you're talking about right today. And right after that closed, the government had an idea. They were going to open up all these group homes.